We jump into a flashback of Hiro-kun's past life. It's a rainy day naturally, and a girl is apologizing to him while standing under an umbrella with another guy. It's the classic breakup scene. The new couple walks off together, leaving Hiro-kun kneeling on the wet pavement. He lets out a scream that looks like pure agony as the rain pours down around him, but a close-up shows what's really happening. Through the tears and rain, a twisted, euphoric smile spreads across his face. He whispers that this situation is actually incredible. He clutches his face, completely overwhelmed with pleasure. In his head, Hez declaring that this feeling is amazing, and that NTR is the absolute greatest thing in the world, while the couple in the background looks back totally confused. Later, we see Hiro-kun frantically tapping on his phone trying to get something to load. A girl nearby waves at him but has way too focused on his screen to notice real human interaction. He puts in his earphones and hits play. Turns out he recorded the breakup from earlier and is listening to his own pathetic begging with immense satisfaction. His phone screen shows a list of voice recordings. The playlist includes files named Hiro-kun NTR and Ayato-kun NTR, implying he collects these moments of heartbreak like trading cards. Hiro-kun fully admits to himself that he was a trashy human being with a wrecked personality. He grins while listening, thinking that the sound of a mind shattering is the best audio track in the world. He reflects on his specific fetish. He loves the idea of being in a happy relationship and getting stolen away. But there was a catch: he actually wanted to be the girl in that scenario, not the guy. He clutches his head in frustration, lamenting that as a biological male, his dream of becoming the tragic heroine of an NTR story was physically impossible. Since he couldn't live it himself, he explains that he went around targeting every couple he could find. He hoped that witnessing their destruction would help ease that unquenchable thirst inside him. Back in the moment, he listens to the recording of his own breakdown again. He's practically drooling, thinking it sounds amazing, and fully accepts that Hez just a degenerate at heart. Walking down the street, he thinks to himself that he would pay good money for an experience like that. He mentally thanks the girl for gifting him such a magnificent mind-breaking scene. He continues walking through the city with his earphones in, completely absorbed in his twisted hobby. The narration notes that this was simply the kind of person he was. He pauses at a crosswalk, looking down at his phone. The narration ominously states that this was his life up until this moment, right before the inevitable accident that led to his reincarnation. The scene snaps back to the final moments of Hiro-kun's previous life. He stands frozen in the middle of the street, sweat dripping down his face as the realization of what's happening hits him. From behind, the massive grille of a truck fills his entire field of vision. The headlights bear down on him like giant glowing eyes just seconds before impact. Consciousness fades back in, but the setting has completely changed. Instead of traffic noise, there are sounds of cooing and happy laughter. A man and a woman look down affectionately, reaching out to touch a pair of tiny infant hands. Now a toddler standing in a crib, the protagonist, now Reiko, watches her parents marvel at her ability to stand. Internally, her very first thought isn't confusion, but gratitude toward a higher power. Clutching a teddy bear, she continues her internal monologue. She's convinced God hasn't abandoned her because her wish has actually been granted. She has been reborn as a girl. Her parents are losing their minds, calling her a genius just for standing up, but Reiko is focused on the long game. She realizes this is her golden ticket to form a pure relationship and then get stolen by another man, something physically impossible in her last life. Gripping the crib bars with a determined smirk, she reflects on her past. Before, she had to settle for being the perpetrator. But in this life, she vows to be the main character of her very own NTR tragedy. Time skips forward to the kindergarten era. Reiko checks her reflection in the mirror, fussing over her bangs to ensure she looks cute enough. Her mother calls out that it's time to go, and Reiko gives a perfectly obedient reply. Sitting in the car, she formally introduces herself in her head as Netora Reiko. To the outside world, she notes she looks like just another ordinary, innocent kindergarten. As her mother drives, Reiko thinks about her new parents, acknowledging they were total strangers to her previous self. She recalls checking the news online and realizing she's in a parallel modern Japan, one conveniently free of pandemics and terrorism. Walking alongside other children, she decides to ignore the historical differences for now. Her bottom line remains unchanged. Her only goal is to become the ultimate NTR heroine. Back in the car during the commute, Reiko covers her mouth to hide a giddy smile. She tells herself that the time has finally come to fulfill the dream she couldn't achieve as a man. Her expression shifts to one of intense, almost manic excitement. She feels like a rising actress who just landed the lead role in a massive Hollywood blockbuster. A wide, slightly unhinged grin spreads across her face as she walks toward the school entrance. She internally declares that this new life is going to be absolutely wild. Inside the classroom, Reiko sits at a table with other kids who praise her advanced origami skills. While accepting the compliments with a cute laugh, she's internally analyzing that NTR scenarios vary wildly, and she needs to pick the right route. Reiko starts mentally flipping through the catalog of degeneracy to pick her new life's genre. She weighs the options: ugly bastards, handsome guys, consensual affairs, or forced scenarios. The menu is vast, and she needs to pick a lane. She pouts a bit, realizing that without some kind of return-by-death cheat ability, she can't exactly sample the whole buffet. She only has one life to live here, so she has to be selective. Throwing her arms open, she makes her executive decision. She's going for the king of NTR, the absolute holy grail of the genre, the childhood friend route. She visualizes the perfect tragedy: two kids growing up together, building a beautiful bond over decades, only for it to be completely trashed by an interloper right at the finish line. The thought alone sends shivers down her spine. She's convinced that the years of shared history will make the eventual betrayal transcend simple physical pleasure. Gazing off into the distance like a philosopher of perversion, Reiko muses that NTR is like fine wine. The longer you let the relationship age, the richer the despair tastes when you finally uncork it. Out on the playground, she scans the other children. She knows the victim of her story can't just be some random extra. The quality of the cuck determines the quality of the tragedy. She spots a boy crouching alone by the flower beds and looms over him. Casting a shadow over his face, she internally declares that she has found her target, Yuki-kun. The boy Yuki looks up with a start. He nervously asks Reiko-chan what's up, clearly surprised by her sudden appearance. Reiko immediately breaks down his character profile. His name is Tachibana Yuki. His a bit on the chubby side, not particularly handsome and perfectly ordinary in every way. However, she notes his redeeming qualities. He helps anyone in trouble, loves flowers and animals, and is shy and timid. Basically a boy with a truly beautiful heart. Reiko looks at him with glistening eyes, overwhelmed by his potential. In her estimation, this kid was practically born for the sole purpose of having his girl stolen from him. She considers the logistics. While being next-door neighbors would have been ideal for window-to-window drama, his house is only a few minutes walk away, so she decides it's close enough to work with. Reiko smiles to herself, clutching an imaginary black heart. She reaffirms that for the role of the victim, looks don't matter. All she needs is a boy with a beautiful, breakable heart. Standing behind him as he gardens, she finalizes her strategy. She reasons that his plain looks and likely inferiority complex will make it incredibly easy to mold him into being completely dependent on her. Reiko stands next to the nervous boy, her imagination already fast-forwarding to the tragic finale. She's picturing the specific moment in the future when the girl who became his entire world is inevitably ripped away. Flipping the switch on her charm, she leans in with a beaming, innocent smile and asks if she can play too. Internally, she's practically vibrating with excitement, imagining that the sounds of despair hell make one day are going to be absolutely divine. Yuki is caught off guard by the sudden proximity and stammers out a confused response, seemingly bewildered that another human being is talking to him this directly. Suddenly, a group of other kids calls out from the playground, shouting for Reiko-chan to stop messing around with the flowers and come play soccer with the cool kids instead. Reiko turns to them with a bright, unwavering smile and declines, announcing that she's playing with Yu-kun today. Yuki watches her, blushing and clearly surprised that she just prioritized him over the group. While keeping up the cute facade for the audience, Reiko's inner thoughts are dark and calculating. She resolves to maintain this act, building his affection and dependency until he is completely wrapped around her little finger. She realizes that simply being present isn't enough. The perfect NTR scenario requires a prize of high value. She decides she has to work on making herself irresistible, a girl truly worth stealing. She visualizes her future self as a flawless beauty. The goal is to make Yuki feel like he can't live without her, while simultaneously making some other guy feel like he has to have her at any cost. However, reality crashes in on the fantasy. She slumps in defeat, realizing that as a kindergartner with zero income, she can't exactly pursue high-end beauty routines or fashion just yet. She quickly pivots to a more feasible strategy. For now, she decides to focus on honing her personality and charm, utilizing the social manipulation skills from her past life to become universally loved. With the long-term plan established, the days begin to pass smoothly, and we see a glimpse of their routine as Reiko greets Yuki in the morning. Time skips forward significantly. Tachibana Yuki and Netora Reiko are shown standing together, now 12 years old and starting the 6th grade. In the hallway, Yuki tries to wave off his messy hair, insisting it's just bedhead and doesn't matter. Reiko ignores his protests, telling him to hold still so she can fix it. Yuki's mother opens the door and apologizes to Reiko for the trouble. She affectionately calls Reiko a lifesaver for always looking after her son, while Yuki just stands there blushing as Reiko fusses over him. Holding a spray bottle and comb, Reiko flashes a perfect polite smile at Yuki's mother. She assures her that she enjoys taking care of Yukun, so there's absolutely no need to worry. Reiko continues her work, misting Yuki's hair and combing it down. She tells him to quit squirming, fully leaning into the role of the over-attentive childhood friend. Yuki, on the other hand, is malfunctioning. His face is bright red and his eyes are watering as he stammers that she is standing way too close. Ignoring his panic, Reiko finishes up with a bright, satisfied smile. She cheerfully announces that he's all set and tells him he looks great today too. Yuki is left dizzy and swirly-eyed from the proximity, managing a weak thanks. Reiko playfully pokes him in the chest, clearly enjoying how easily she can mess with his composure. Grooming session complete, the pair heads out the door. Yuki's mom waves them off from the entryway, reminding them to watch out for cars on the way to school. As they walk, Reiko turns back to Yuki with a mischievous glint in her eye. She remarks that it's been quite a while since they walked to school holding hands. Without waiting for an answer, she reaches out and grabs his hand. They continue across a pedestrian bridge hand in hand, looking like the picture-perfect image of innocent young love. Their arrival at school doesn't go unnoticed. A group of boys immediately starts jeering, teasing them about being hubby and wifey and commenting on how passionate they are so early in the morning. The public pressure gets to Yuki. He abruptly yanks his hand away, shouting at the group that they aren't like that, while Reiko stands there looking totally shocked by his sudden rejection. Yuki stomps ahead, grumbling and wishing the other kids would just knock it off. Reiko trails a few steps behind him, her head hung low in apparent sadness. But hidden from Yuki's view, Reiko's expression morphs into a twisted, ecstatic grin. She actually drools a little, thinking to herself that this public perception of them as an official couple is the perfect setup for the tragedy she's planning. Hearing a strange noise behind him, Yuki turns around in confusion. He asks Reiko if she said something, catching her right as she wipes her mouth. Reiko instantly snaps back to a goofy, innocent expression. She feigns ignorance, claiming she didn't say a word, leaving Yuki looking skeptical, but deciding to let it go. The school day passes without further incident, and the scene shifts to the shoe lockers after classes have ended. Reiko opens her locker and pauses, letting out a small "oh." She turns to Yuki and apologizes, revealing a love letter with a heart sticker waiting inside her shoe compartment. Reiko puts on a bright, convincing smile and tells Yuki she completely forgot she has something to do today. She urges him to go on ahead without her, and when Yuki offers to help with whatever it is, she politely shuts that down. Yuki looks concerned, but Reiko waves him off, insisting it's nothing to worry about. She says she'll be fine and bids him goodbye until tomorrow, turning to walk back into the school alone. Yuki watches her leave, clearly feeling uneasy about the sudden change of plans. Suddenly, a voice from behind whispers right into his ear that something smells fishy. Yuki jumps and spins around to find Fuyuki standing there. Fuyuki is grinning like a troublemaker, clearly intrigued by Reiko's secretive behavior. The scene shifts to a quiet spot on school grounds where a boy is waiting. He beams with relief, saying he's so glad she actually came. Reiko, holding the love letter, cuts to the chase and asks him why he asked to meet. The boy doesn't beat around the bush. He confesses that he likes her and asks Reiko straight out if she will go out with him. Reiko stares at him with wide, shimmering eyes, processing the confession. The boy stands frozen, blushing and sweating bullets as he waits for her verdict. Reiko lowers her gaze, looking genuinely apologetic. She tells him she's sorry, but she simply cannot go out with him. The boy looks devastated and asks why not. Reiko turns her head away, staring at the sky, and quietly replies that she can't say. A realization strikes the boy and his expression darkens. He stares intently at her and asks if he is the reason, causing Reiko's eyes to widen in surprise. Jealousy takes over, and the boy starts ranting about the guy who is always glued to her side. He insults Yuki, calling him a plain, gloomy loser who sucks at sports and studying, demanding to know what she sees in him. He turns his back on her, muttering in frustration about how he can't understand it. Reiko stands silently behind him, her fists clenching tight. Reiko snaps. She swings her arm with significant force, delivering a sharp slap. The boy clutches his cheek, looking at her in utter shock. Unbeknownst to them, Yuki and Fuyuki are peeking from around a corner, witnessing the entire violent outburst. Reiko screams at the boy, furious and emotional. She warns him never to talk about Yukun like that again, declaring that he is irreplaceable and means more to her than anything in the world. Reiko doubles down on the performance, screaming through her tears. She tells the guy that she's treasured Yuki since the very first day they met, declaring with absolute terrifying conviction that he is more precious to her than anyone else on Earth. The rejected boy, clearly not paid enough for this level of drama, awkwardly backs away. Reiko is left standing there heaving for breath while Yuki watches from his hiding spot looking like he just saw a ghost or an angel. The boy decides to cut his losses and sprints away crying loudly as he flees the scene of his public execution. Reiko watches him go with a frustrated pout while Yuki stands on the stairs, eyes welling up, completely moved by her violent defense of his honor. Now that the audience of one has fled, Reiko is left alone on the walkway. She clutches her arms, her body trembling as the adrenaline crashes, and the reality of what she just did sets in. Internally, however, the trembling isn't from emotion, it's panic. Cold sweat pours down her face as she realizes she almost jumped the gun and triggered the NTR route way too early in the timeline. She buries her face in her arm, mentally screaming. That guy she just slapped into next week was a basketball club ace, a prime candidate she had bookmarked for future schemes. She basically just threw a valuable asset into the trash because she lost her temper. Reiko frantically tries to get a grip, her inner monologue a chaotic mess of self-loathing. She knows she messed up. She let a moment of irritation almost derail her entire carefully crafted master plan for the sake of a quick slap. As Yuki approaches, Reiko forces herself to switch masks. She reminds herself that an NTR arc at this age is simply too premature to hit the right emotional notes. If anyone deserves a slap for almost ruining the long game, it's her. She looks down, adopting a serious contemplative expression. Logically, she knows that the emotional damage of a betrayal right now would be shallow puppy love heartbreak rather than the soul-crushing devastation she's aiming for. Yuki smiles at her, radiating pure relief and affection. Reiko analyzes him like a scientist observing a lab rat. While he is definitely top-tier cuck material, he hasn't marinated nearly enough to achieve the maximum level of mind break she desires. She stares back at him, her eyes wide with a disturbing mix of genuine affection and cold calculation. She knows she has to play the long game, even if holding back her twisted desires is physically painful. Deep down, her inner self is writhing, admitting she was tempted to just blow up the plan with a premature rival. On the surface, however, the mask is perfect. She smiles sweetly at Yuki, burying the monster back under the floorboard. Yuki, blushing furiously, points back toward the corner where he and Fuyuki had been lurking. Reiko isn't surprised she clocked them ages ago, but she decides to mentally blame this whole mess on Yuki for being so damn desirable in the first place. A dark, predatory smirk begins to tug at the corners of her mouth as she processes his reaction. She touches her lips, clearly getting a little high off the raw emotion of the situation. She gazes intently at Yuki's tear-stained face, absolutely mesmerized. Seeing the fear of loss in his eyes, she licks her lips, fighting the urge to just break him right here and now. Reiko is back in her room, lying on the floor with her notebook. She needs to calm her racing heart and look at the logistics. It's time to review the roadmap and figure out exactly when the big NTR event needs to happen. She starts picturing her future self in a high school uniform. After running the simulations in her head, she decides that high school is the target era. That's when the drama hits the hardest. It's a balancing act. Letting the relationship age makes the eventual betrayal richer, but it also increases the risk. The more time that passes, the higher the chance some random, unpredictable variable could ruin the whole setup. Then there's the issue of her own endurance. She's worried that if she has to hold back her urges for too long, she might snap and trigger the event too early, ruining the pacing she's worked so hard for. She considers the absolute worst-case scenario, a sudden accident. She imagines a truck hitting Yuki and realizes that if he dies before they even reach the NTR arc, it's game over. Weighing the risks against the rewards, she concludes that high school is the latest safe deadline. She looks through a frame smiling as she notes that starting next year, they'll officially be middle schoolers. She reviews her progress over the last decade. From kindergarten all the way through elementary school, she has successfully managed to max out Yuki's affection and dependency stat. With the foundation laid, the focus shifts to self-improvement. She plans to polish her appearance to become a prize that is truly worth stealing. However, she's hitting a wall with her age. She doesn't have the freedom of a part-time job like a high schooler, so she has to fund her entire beauty regimen on a limited allowance. Budget constraints or not, she is fired up. The logic is simple. The prettier she becomes, the deeper Yuki's despair will be when he loses her. She vows to level up into the perfect NTR beauty. A dark, intense expression takes over her face. She clutches her cheeks in anticipation, determined to gift Yuki the ultimate life-defining trauma. Her expression shifts to a cunning smile as she outlines the next phase. Middle school is where relationships begin to form, which means she has one critical task to handle. She holds her hands out as if grasping an invisible puppet. It's time to start scouting and securing potential cuckers, the men who will actually execute the betrayal. She immediately brings up a specific name, Kurushima Fuyuki. She visualizes the soccer player, revealing that she's had him in mind for the best friend NTR route for quite a while. She imagines getting close to him, noting that she's already sunk her claws in. He is fresh, athletic, and good-looking, the perfect candidate to trigger Yuki's inferiority complex. Reiko steps into the role of matchmaker. Knowing that Yuki is shy and Fuyuki is athletic, she bridges the gap by introducing a soccer manga she knows they'll both dig, working from the shadows to establish common ground. Thanks to her setup, the two boys hit it off immediately. Reiko keeps the momentum going by creating opportunities for the three of them to hang out, solidifying their group dynamic. Reiko beams as she stands between her two best buds. Internally, though, she's urging them to get closer, like really close. She wants a bond so deep it borders on romance, all to maximize the impact of the eventual betrayal. While she cultivates their bromance, Reiko also focuses on Fuyuki individually. She decides that simple friendship isn't enough. She needs him to desire her enough to eventually want to steal her away for himself. She joins the boys on the soccer field, knowing exactly how teenage boys think they respect skill. If she wants to dominate this dynamic, she needs to show them she can outperform them physically. Even on Fuyuki's home turf of the soccer club, Reiko is a beast. She demonstrates superior ball control and power, leaving Fuyuki blushing and genuinely impressed by her technique. It turns out Reiko has been training in basically every major sport since she was a toddler for this exact scenario. In her mind, a perfect NTR heroine needs to be versatile enough to appeal to any high-value target. The strategy pays off. Fuyuki starts viewing her as a worthy rival rather than just a girl. She frequently crushes him at his own specialty, keeping his attention laser-focused on her. She mixes this rivalry with calculated displays of femininity. A little wiping of sweat here, a slight lift of the shirt there. She weaponizes her looks to leave Fuyuki flustered and confused. Within a year, she has Fuyuki completely wrapped around her finger. He looks at her with obvious affection, totally unaware that he is dancing right in the palm of her hand. Reiko visualizes a little devil on her shoulder, teasing her conscience. She admits that toying with an innocent boy's heart stings a little, but compares the guilt to something trivial, like missing a daily login bonus for a gacha game. Gazing out the window, she decides that relying on just one candidate is poor risk management. Securing Fuyuki is a win, sure, but a mastermind always needs a backup plan. She considers the stolen by a random stranger route, acknowledging it has its own appeal. However, since she has plenty of time in middle school, she resolves to lock in at least one more specific candidate to ensure the plan's success. Reiko imagines herself surrounded by a roster of faceless boys. Her goal is to carefully curate and stockpile as many top-tier candidates as possible, so she has options when the time comes. She clenches her fists, fully aware of how twisted she sounds. But self-awareness doesn't stop her excitement. She gleefully declares that adding more rivals to the mix will only make the final tragedy that much sweeter. And just like that, the years fly by. Reiko spends her days waiting in the hallway of life, telling herself that every boring, peaceful day is just compound interest on the despair she's eventually going to cash in on. Finally, the seasons turn, and the big day arrives. Under the obligatory anime cherry blossoms, Reiko and Yuki make their debut as fresh-faced middle schoolers. Their walk to the ceremony gets interrupted by Reiko's mom, who insists on documenting the milestone. She herds them together, marveling at how fast they've grown. She holds up her phone to show off the results, gushing over how adorable Reiko looks in her new sailor uniform. Reiko flashes a dazzling, practiced smile and thanks her mom, sweetly playing the role of the perfect daughter like she's gunning for an Oscar. Then she pivots to Yuki. Humming a happy little tune, she looks him up and down in his stiff black gakuren. She hits him with a point-blank compliment, telling him he looks really cool. It's a critical hit. Yuki completely crumbles. He looks away, sweating and blushing as he stammers out an awkward thank you. Internally, however, Reiko is screaming. The gap between his pure innocence and her dark plans is just too delicious. Her inner self is contorting with glee. She's already fantasizing about shattering that precious mind of his, even as she playfully teases him out loud for turning red. As they walk hand in hand, she mentally coos at her victim, telling him to just wait patiently for the day she eventually gets stolen away from him. Reiko takes a moment to reintroduce her twisted backstory. She is Netora Reiko, a reincarnated beauty who used to be a guy obsessed with the fantasy of being the girl in an NTR scenario. Since biology got in the way of that dream in her past life, she coped by becoming a total degenerate, who went around ruining other people's relationships instead. That life came to an abrupt end, thanks to the usual suspect, a runaway truck sending her straight to the afterlife. But she views it as a miracle. She was reborn exactly as she always wanted as a girl, which she takes as definitive proof that God fully supports her twisted ambition. Reiko looks back on her childhood, reaffirming that her choices weren't random. She specifically selected Yu-kun to be the victim of her twisted plot, all to fulfill that fleeting, dark wish from her past life. Her objective is simple, if incredibly cruel. She intends to completely mind-break Yuki as the grand finale of her plan. With a determined glint in her eyes and a quick lick of her lips, she renews her vow. In this new life, she is going to become the ultimate NTR heroine, no matter the cost. The scene shifts to the classroom where Reiko is already the center of attention. A group of girls surrounds her, eager to know if she's decided which club she wants to join yet. Reiko scratches her head, feigning a bit of sheepish confusion. She lies that she's still on the fence, mentioning she was thinking about maybe joining a cultural club this time around. The other girls can't believe it. They point out that seniors from both the basketball and volleyball clubs have already tried to scout her, insisting it's a total waste of her natural athleticism. Reiko plays the modest girl card to perfection. She twirls a lock of hair and claims she just doesn't have the mental toughness for a sports club, brushing off their praise while the girls insist she's being way too humble. Nearby, Fuyuki lets out a heavy sigh. He grumbles that if the school actually had a girls' soccer team, he could have kept practicing with Rei and the others. Reiko walks over to the two boys, internally celebrating. She managed to land in the same class as both Yuki and Fuyuki's step 1 is complete. Yuki brings up their soccer history, and Fuyuki cheerfully admits that Reiko is actually better than him. Reiko stares intently at Yuki's face. She can't help but notice the obvious Yuki-kun has become genuinely attractive. She recalls that the change started around the middle of 6th grade. Something shifted in him, driving him to put real effort into his studies, exercise, and fashion. The results speak for themselves. The once chubby, disheveled boy she grew up with has transformed into a legitimate pretty boy. Back in the present, Reiko clings to Yuki's sleeve, trembling slightly. She puts on a vulnerable act, telling him she's so glad she didn't end up in a class all by herself. While Fuyuki tells her to stop sounding so pathetic, Reiko's inner thoughts are ecstatic. Having both her victim and the best friend NTR candidate in the same class is the jackpot for brewing a messy love triangle. She turns her gaze back to Yuki with a sly smile. She suggests that even without her or Fuyuki around, Yuki would surely make tons of new friends if he joined a cultural club, looking to Fuyuki to back her up. Fuyuki stammers a bit, his face flushing. Since she shot down the idea of playing, he pivots to a backup plan. She should join the soccer club as their manager instead. He really starts to sell it, beaming with hope. He argues that since she knows so much about nutrition, she'd be a huge asset to the team, and by extension to him. Reiko gasps, covering her mouth with her hands. To anyone watching, she looks incredibly touched by his thoughtful invitation. Internally, however, she is absolutely squealing with delight. She loves that Fuyuki is completely oblivious to his own subconscious desire to pull her away from Yuki. That kind of careless nature makes him the perfect pawn for her future drama. Her mind immediately goes to the gutter. She starts fantasizing about the manager arc, imagining Fuyuki using the position to corner her in the club room, while poor Yuki stands helplessly just outside the door. The daydream gets specific. She pictures a tearful version of herself, pinned against the wall, whispering weak token protests about how wrong this is while Fuyuki looms over her. In her head, fantasy Fuyuki goes full possessive mode. He demands that she be his manager, not the team's, and orders her to forget about everyone else, especially Yuki. Reiko's imagination runs wild as the imaginary Fuyuki leans in close. She pictures herself tragically surrendering to the moment, tears streaming down her face as he moves in for the kiss. The scenario ends in a messy, depraved makeout session right behind Yuki's back. In reality, Reiko is blushing furiously, admitting to herself that a sticky secret affair is exactly the kind of spice she craves. But she has to physically shake herself out of the trance. She trembles with the effort of holding back, reminding herself that the NTR arc is strictly scheduled for high school. Jumping the gun now would ruin the pacing of her master plan. Pulling it together, Reiko puts on her polite, apologetic face. She tells Fuyuki that while she's flattered, she's going to have to pass on the manager gig. She clasps her hands and gives him a bright, innocent smile, stating firmly that she's decided to stick with her original plan of joining a cultural club. To seal the deal, she latches onto Yuki's arm, pulling the surprised boy close. She smoothly lies that she and Yukun had already planned to check out various cultural clubs together today. Fuyuki looks visibly defeated. His shoulders slump as he mutters that he understands he can't exactly force her if she doesn't want to do it. With the crisis averted and the timeline preserved, Reiko turns to Yuki with a dazzling smile. She cheerfully drags him off, ready to find a club that fits her safe, non-sporting criteria. Yuki freezes up, his eyes going wide and a blush spreading across his cheeks. He looks completely taken aback by Reiko's sudden shift in demeanor. Reiko doubles down and boldly clasps his hand right in the middle of the hallway. The surrounding students immediately erupt into squeals and whispers, treating this public display of affection like a major event. Yuki tries to pull away, stammering that they are middle schoolers now, and should NT be acting like this? Reiko laughs off his embarrassment, cheerfully declaring that she doesn't mind it at all. Yuki falls silent, his resistance fading into a look of quiet longing. He watches her, unable to hide the fact that despite his protests, he actually enjoys the closeness. Hand in hand, the pair proceeds to tour the school's cultural clubs. They peek into the tea ceremony, shogi computer handicrafts, gardening and art clubs, looking for the right fit. After visiting a wide variety of rooms, they end up back in the corridor. Reiko turns to Yuki and asks him what he thinks after seeing all the options. Yuki admits that the gardening and handicrafts clubs look somewhat fun, but he remains undecided. He turns the question back to Reiko, asking what she wants to do. Reiko pauses, her expression becoming soft and thoughtful. She looks at him silently for a moment, letting the question hang in the air. She gazes up at him with affectionate eyes, and says she just wants to join whichever club he picks. A small, "just kidding" text floats next to her, but the delivery is undeniably flirtatious. The comment hits Yuki hard. He stares back at her with wide eyes, sweat forming on his brow, as his face turns a deep shade of crimson. He starts to stammer, his mind reeling, as he tries to ask what she means by that. Reiko, having successfully flustered him, feigns ignorance and turns away. She points enthusiastically toward a sign down the hall, announcing that the next club is right there. Yuki is dragged along, still dizzy from her earlier comment. They arrive at a sliding door at the end of the corridor. The sign above it clearly identifies it as the literature club. Inside the room, a girl with glasses named Shirase Yuri is struggling on her tiptoes. She groans with effort, trying desperately to reach something on a high shelf, when a knock sounds at the door. Reiko slides the door open with a cheerful greeting announcing their arrival. The sudden noise startles Yuri, causing her to jump and fumble the books she was reaching for. The sudden noise is too much for the girl's balance. She lets out a yelp, losing her footing on the step stool, and flailing her arms in a desperate attempt to stay upright. Gravity wins this round. As the girl tips backward, a stack of heavy books wobbles off the shelf, plummeting straight toward her. Reiko's eyes lock onto the disaster in progress. Reiko shouts for Yuki to move. They both scramble forward, diving in to shield the girl and deflect the falling literature before she gets buried. Safe but definitely shaken, the girl clutches her cardigan and thanks them for the save. She explains she was just trying to reorganize the high shelves, when the door opening caught her off guard. As the dust settles, Reiko leans in, getting right up in the girl's personal space to stare at her face. The girl freezes, sweating under the sudden silent scrutiny. A smile snaps onto Reiko's face. She points a finger, confidently identifying the girl as their classmate Shirase Yuri, and asks if she's got the name right. Yuri blinks behind her thick round glasses, looking completely stunned. She stammers out a confirmation, surprised that someone like Reiko even knows she exists. Reiko laughs, leaning against a table with a bright grin. She says it's obvious, since they're in the same class, though Yuri quietly mutters that she didn't think she stood out enough to be remembered. The power dynamic is instant. Reiko radiates effortless confidence, while Yuri shrinks into herself, looking like a small animal caught in headlights. Reiko steps back into Yuri's space, asking if this means she's a member of the literature club. She notes that, since they've never really spoken, this is a total surprise. Yuri looks away, explaining her motivation. She admits she loves books and hoped joining a club with shared interests would help her finally make some friends. Reiko claps her hands together, acting shocked and delighted. She loudly declares that she reads a ton of books too, instantly manufacturing a common interest. She rests her chin on her arm, looking up at Yuri with a gaze calculated for maximum charm damage. She softly tells Yuri she wishes she had taken the time to chat with her sooner. The approach works like a charm. Yuri blushes deeply, stammering in disbelief that Reiko is being so nice to her, while Reiko just hums in affirmation. Flustered but happy, Yuri fidgets with her hair and lowers her gaze. She starts to speak up, ready to open up a bit now that the ice has been thoroughly shattered. Yuri is eating this up. Blushing behind those thick lenses, she admits she's actually wanted to chat with Netora-san for a while now too. Reiko just stares back. The silence stretches a beat too long, and the intensity of her gaze starts making Yuri sweat. Then the tension snaps. Reiko throws up a finger heart, beaming and squealing about how happy she is that the feeling is mutual. Yuki, being the only normal person in the room, is looking at the heavy foreign hardcovers scattered on the floor. He asks if everyone is actually physically okay after that near miss with the bookshelf. Reiko ignores the books entirely. She suddenly reaches out and grabs Yuri's face with both hands, startling the poor girl into silence. She leans in way too close, staring deep into Yuri's eyes, and asks if she hit her head when she fell. Yuki watches from the sidelines, wondering what genre of anime he stumbled into, while Yuri waves her hands frantically and stammers that she's completely fine. Reiko refuses to let go. She insists that head injuries can be delayed and scary, so she absolutely must check, just to be safe, of course. She gently moves Yuri's glasses and bangs aside, inspecting her forehead with the focus of a doctor, or maybe a predator playing with its food, and tells her to stay still. Satisfied with the inspection, Reiko pulls back with a cheerful grin and announces that Yuri looks perfectly fine. She immediately pivots to the real objective. Flashing a dazzling smile, she asks Yuri-chan if it would be okay for her to join the literature club. Reiko reaches out and pats the stunned girl on the head, effectively treating her like a cute pet while Yuri stands there frozen in confusion. Reiko grabs an application form thanking Yuri for the help and decides she'll take it home to fill out and submit tomorrow. Unable to contain herself, Reiko wraps Yuri in a tight hug, squealing with joy about being on a first-name basis. Yuki points out that this looks a lot like sexual harassment, but Reiko insists it's just normal girl behavior. Then Reiko leans in to whisper directly into Yuri's ear. She murmurs that since it's perfectly normal Yuri, should NT feel the need to hold back either. Reiko pulls back, leaving Yuri completely frozen. The poor girl is left staring, wide-eyed face burning red, trying to process the intimate whisper she just received. Reiko's internal monologue kicks in. Based on that reaction, she's confirmed her initial hypothesis: Shirase Yuri is definitely into girls. This unlocks a brand new objective for Reiko, the Yuri NTR route. Switching back to her public persona, Reiko gives a cheerful wave. She tells Yuri she'll see her in class tomorrow, wrapping up the encounter with a bright smile before heading for the door. Left alone in the club room, Yuri is a mess. She's blushing and sweating frantically, trying to convince herself that this is just how normal girls interact. She tries to walk it off, but her brain is clearly short-circuiting. Outside, Yuki waves goodbye to the club room, but the moment Reiko turns away and is out of his line of sight, her expression shifts. The cheerful mask drops, replaced by a dark, triumphant smirk and a quiet, sinister chuckle. The transition is instant. Reiko's face twists into a full-blown, predatory grin. She's secured her new target, and the gears are already turning for her next masterpiece, a Yuri-themed betrayal arc. In her mind, Reiko marks the mission as a complete success. She visualizes a future scenario where she's holding Yuri in a romantic embrace, confirming that the Yuri NTR slot has been officially filled. Reiko continues to grin to herself. Everything is proceeding exactly as she designed it. Snagging Yuri wasn't an accident. It was a calculated move in her grand scheme. Internally, Reiko celebrates with a mental image of a gacha game victory screen. She successfully pulled Shirase Yuri, an SSR tier candidate, for the Yuri NTR route. Her internal monologue reveals the setup. Reiko notes that while Yuri might not even realize it herself yet, Reiko clocked her preferences on the very first day of middle school. Reiko prides herself on her radar. She thinks that Yuri can't hide from her experienced eyes. The shy girl is a prime candidate, and Reiko intends to exploit that fully. We get a glimpse into Reiko's past life philosophy. Back when she was a professional, she didn't discriminate based on gender. Inserting herself between two women to ruin a relationship is what she considers the 8th deadly sin, and she loves committing it. Reiko doubles down on her observation skills. She noticed immediately that the way Yuri looks at her is fundamentally different from how other girls do. It's the look of a future victim. Reiko frames herself as a champion of diversity. She decides that everyone, regardless of preference, deserves an equal opportunity to be part of her NTR lineup. Truly, she is a heroine for the modern age. Reiko breaks down the play-by-play. She admits she steered Yuki to the literature club on purpose, waited for the perfect moment, and ad-libbed that romantic meet-cute to physically fluster Yuri. It was a precision strike, and it worked perfectly. Reiko does a quick head count of her victims. With the Yuri route officially unlocked way faster than expected, she's now juggling 2 active targets for her grand scheme, Yuki and Yuri. She admits she might have come on a little strong back there. Breaking character is a rookie mistake, but she justifies the aggression. When you're trying to breach the gender barrier to set up a Yuri NTR route, sometimes you have to use a battering ram instead of a key. She pats herself on the back for a job well done. Yuki is completely oblivious to her ulterior motives as usual, so she chalks the whole interaction up as a necessary investment for their future trauma. But then the strategic analysis kicks in, and she spots a massive red flag. Yuri is plain quiet and socially invisible. Dropping a timid girl like that into a high-tier group with popular guys like Yuki and Fuyuki is basically throwing a lamb into a wood chipper. Reiko runs the simulation and sees the bad ending immediately. If a gloomy, nerdy girl suddenly starts hanging out with the class idols, the other girls in the hierarchy are gonna eat her alive. And Reiko knows this for a fact, because she did her homework. Like any diligent psychopath, she researched Yuri's elementary school history. The data shows that Yuri wasn't bullied outright, but she was subjected to the silent treatment, quietly ostracized by the entire class. Reiko weighs her options. She could try to tank the social aggro herself, but that has diminishing returns. If the pressure gets too high, the timid Yuri will just turtle up and flee the friend group, entirely ruining the whole plan. Reiko flashes a determined smile. She didn't reincarnate just to let a little thing like social dynamics ruin her masterpiece. Passive heroines get bad endings. Reiko writes the script. A few days later, Yuri is still visibly overwhelmed by the sudden shift in her life, clutching her sweater like a lifeline. But Reiko isn't worried, she's already drafted a solution. With a mental click, the new strategy locks into place. Reiko takes a moment to admire her own genius, confirming that her manipulation skills are still sharp enough to cut glass. Cut to Reiko's house. She throws the door open with a blindingly bright smile, welcoming Yuri inside, like a spider inviting a fly to a tea party. While Yuri stands there flustered and apologizing for existing, Reiko reaffirms her core philosophy. When it comes to crafting the perfect NTR scenario, there are no lines she won't cross. We get a quick tactical recap. Reiko, reincarnated beauty and aspiring victim, has secured the perfect candidate for her Yuri route. But as she explains to a mental puppet of Yuri, there is a slight structural defect in the plan. If she drags the current unpolished version of Yuri into her high-status social circle, the other girls will reject the transplant. That leads to bullying, isolation, and Yuri quitting the game before Reiko can even start the main quest. So Reiko has initiated a secret submission to patch this vulnerability. Step 1. Get the target into her base of operations. The next morning, the usual classroom chatter dies down as the sliding door rattles open. Every head turns, expecting the teacher, or maybe a late arrival, but the atmosphere shifts immediately. It's Yuri, but she's practically unrecognizable. The thick, opaque glasses and messy bangs are gone, swapped out for sleek, thin frames and a trendy hairstyle that actually frames her face instead of hiding it. Reiko immediately waves her over with a bright morning Yuri-chan. The classroom instantly devolves into confused murmurs. The boys are frantically whispering, trying to figure out who the new transfer student is, completely failing to realize this is the girl who's been sitting in the corner all year. Reiko watches the chaos with a satisfied internal smirk. Her operation was a total success. She hasn't just polished Yuri up, she's completely overwritten the gloomy outcast data, with high-tier beauty forcing a server-wide update on the class social hierarchy. A quick flashback shows us how the sausage was made. Reiko realized Yuri already had the raw stats. Face and figure were fine, so she spent the previous evening giving a crash course in hairstyling and school-appropriate makeup to unlock the character's full potential. Back in the present, Reiko admires the result. The logic is simple: if Yuri is undeniably cute, the social barrier dissolves. No one is going to question why the popular clique is hanging out with a dazzling beauty, whereas a gloomy loner would have drawn aggro. Yuri's still internally the same shy girl, despite the external patch shuffles over to Reiko's desk. She stammers out a nervous morning greeting, clearly terrified by the sudden influx of eyeballs. Reiko beams back loudly, asking how she likes the new style. Yuri just fidgets with her bag, turning a shade of red that matches the sunset, clearly not built for this level of spotlight yet. To cement the new status quo, Reiko pulls Yuri into a tight hug, right in the middle of the room. She loudly declares that Yuri is literally the cutest, effectively forcing the rest of the class and a very flustered Yuki to acknowledge Yuri as a valid love interest. By lunchtime, the integration is complete. The four of them, Reiko, Yuki, Fuyuki, and the upgraded Yuri, are sitting together in the cafeteria. The vibe shifts from fashion to academics as Fuyuki lets out a heavy dramatic sigh about the upcoming midterms. Fuyuki complains that club activities are suspended for test week, which is a tragedy for his soccer schedule. Yuki chimes in with a shrug, noting that he can probably coast to an average score without burning too many brain cells. Reiko looks at Fuyuki with feigned shock, joking that she always pictured him as a scholar. Fuyuki questions if he really gives off dumb jock energy, while Yuki admits he's not exactly thrilled about hitting the books either. Yuri joins the pity party, lamenting that she hits her academic ceiling pretty quickly no matter how hard she tries. Yuki points out that Reiko and Fuyuki are naturally smart, so they'll be fine, though Reiko insists Yuki is selling himself short. Seeing the opening, Reiko claps her hands together, her expression shifting from casual to scheming. She excitedly proposes a solution: they should all form a study group. She leans in, eyes sparkling, and really sells the pitch. She claims she's always wanted to do a group study session, framing it as the perfect wholesome activity for their squad, though knowing Reiko studying is probably just a cover for more social engineering. The suggestion hits the group like a flashbang. Yuki, Yuri, and Fuyuki all freeze up, their faces turning red as they process the invite. Going to a girl's house, specifically Reiko's house, for a private study session is a heavy concept for a bunch of middle schoolers. Yuri is the first to break the silence, stammering that she'll go if everyone else is. Fuyuki quickly jumps on the bandwagon, reasoning that since club activities are cancelled, he's free. He mutters something under his breath about this being a classic manga scenario, clearly aware of the trope. Reiko is absolutely delighted. She throws up a heart sign, with her hands beaming at the group. She specifically turns to Yu-kun to ask if he's excited, putting him on the spot and ensuring he has absolutely zero room to back out. The weekend rolls around and the trio gathers outside the Netora residence. Reiko swings the front door open to welcome them, greeting everyone with a cheerful shout that echoes down the street. She waves them inside, but her outfit immediately hijacks the conversation. She's dressed in a loose, sleeveless white shirt tied at the waist and denim shorts that are, well, let's just say they're very short. It's a look that screams relaxed home, wear a little too loudly to be accidental, as she tells them to make themselves at home. Since it's just them, the loose fabric of her shirt gapes open. The casual outfit leaves a significant amount of skin exposed around her midriff, catching her guests completely off guard. The view from the back isn't helping matters either. The denim shorts are dangerously high-cut, drawing eyes downward as she turns around to lead the way into the house. The reaction is immediate and chaotic. Fuyuki looks away with a scowl. Yuri covers her mouth in shock, and Yuki looks like his brain is currently melting out of his ears. Reiko, feigning total ignorance, turns back with an innocent expression to ask what's wrong. They eventually settle into Reiko's room to study, sitting around a low table. The atmosphere is thick with tension. While Yuki tries desperately to focus on his notes, Fuyuki is staring intently at him from the side, watching his friend's eyes like a hawk. The source of the tension becomes obvious pretty quickly. Reiko leans forward over the table, and gravity does the rest, giving Yuki a direct line of sight down her loose shirt. Fuyuki watches in horror as Yuki turns beet red, clearly seeing something he definitely should be seeing. Reiko keeps her face pleasant, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. SSML. She remains leaning forward, letting the moment linger just long enough to inflict maximum psychological damage on the poor boy. Breaking the silence, Reiko stands up and notices their empty glasses. She announces she'll go grab refills, and Yuri quickly jumps up, offering to help carry the tray just to escape the awkwardness of the room. As the girls leave the room, the door clicks shut behind them. The sudden silence is heavy. Fuyuki, still sitting at the table, immediately calls out to Yuki in a low, serious voice. Yuki turns, trying to look innocent and confused, asking what's up. Fuyuki doesn't look at him directly. He stares off to the side, a bead of sweat rolling down his cheek, and asks a pointed question. You saw it, right? Yuki blinks, trying to play dumb and asking, saw what? But Fuyuki isn't having it. He leans in, closes his eyes intense and desperate, and whispers the forbidden knowledge. It was pink. Fuyuki isn't letting him off the hook. He grabs Yuki by the shoulders and starts shaking him, demanding he stop playing dumb. Yuki is sweating bullets, desperately trying to maintain his innocence, but it's a losing battle. Fuyuki lays it out plain and simple. He points out that Reiko's shirt is practically transparent, and he accuses Yuki of staring right at her underwear. Yuki's reaction is an immediate giveaway. He sputters, his face turning bright red, which Fuyuki takes as a full confession. He points an accusing finger, shouting triumphantly that he knew Yuki saw it too. Panicked that the girls might hear them, Yuki hisses at Fuyuki to keep his voice down, calling him an idiot. But as he looks closer, he realizes Fuyuki's face is just as flushed as his own. The realization hits hard. Yuki stammers that it was an accident, and he wasn't trying to look, but the shared embarrassment creates a weird moment of solidarity between the two boys. Meanwhile, just outside the door, the girls are having their own conversation. Reiko is loudly teasing Yuri about chest sizes, casually mentioning that her own have grown lately, while hugging the flustered girl. Back in the room, the dynamic shifts as Yuki realizes this isn't a one-time thing. He asks if Fuyuki has noticed this kind of wardrobe malfunction before, and Fuyuki looks away looking incredibly guilty. Fuyuki admits it. He explains that Reiko never wears a camisole at school either, revealing that her summer uniform is practically see-through, and he's been agonizing over whether to tell her for ages. Yuki buries his face in his hands, overwhelmed by this revelation. He mutters that Fuyuki is way more of a closet pervert than he ever suspected. Suddenly, footsteps approach. Panic sets in as they hear the girls returning. The boys scramble to separate and look natural, but in their haste, limbs get tangled, and they lose their balance. The door slides open. Reiko enters with a bright, cheerful smile, holding a bottle of tea and apologizing for the wait, completely unaware of the chaos she's walking into. Reiko freezes mid-step. Her eyes go wide as she takes in the scene before her. Fuyuki is looming over Yuki, effectively pinning him to the floor in a pose that looks undeniably intimate, surrounded by imaginary roses. Reiko stares in disbelief, her brain short-circuiting. While Yuri asks if they are okay, the boys frantically try to explain that they were just messing around and tripped, but the visual is absolutely damning. Reiko's mind immediately jumps to the most catastrophic conclusion possible. She imagines a romance blossoming between the two boys and is horrified by the thought that she might get cucked by the very guy she hired to steal Yuki from her. Later that night, Yuki is lying in bed, blissfully unaware of Reiko's mental crisis. He smiles at his phone, thinking about how fun the day was, while a dark hooded figure silently creeps into his room through the window behind him. The sudden intruder turns out to be nothing more than a notification on Yuki's phone, which makes him jump. The message is from Reiko asking if he's free. He replies that he was just playing games and asks what's on her mind. She explains that she thinks they might have accidentally switched notebooks. The hooded figure is revealed to be Reiko, who immediately starts rummaging through Yuki's school bag. She takes out his notebook, which has his full name, Tachibana Yuki, written inside, and carefully places something between the pages. At that exact moment, Yuki receives a notification on his phone, and he lets out a gasp of surprise at the message. The scene cuts back to earlier that evening, revealing the true reason for the late-night visit through a text conversation. Reiko messaged Yuki apologizing and explaining that she accidentally took his notebook home. After Yuki confirmed he had hers, she asked if she could come over right away to get it. Just as Yuki is relaxing, his phone buzzes with a series of urgent messages from Reiko. She tells him there's something in his room she needs to check, and that she'll be there soon. Yuki stares at the messages, completely blindsided by her sudden announcement. The quiet of the evening is broken by the sound of the doorbell, startling Yuki in his room. Outside, Reiko stands near his house, looking at her phone, from which she appears to have just sent a message, telling him to wait. The hooded figure is revealed to be Reiko, who has somehow entered Yuki's room. She stands before him in the same outfit from the study session. With a playful wink and a lick of her lips, she makes her presence known. The mysterious intruder pulls back their hood, revealing Reiko with a wide, excited smile. Leaning over Yuki's bed, she cheerfully announces that she is here. That dark hooded figure was just a figment of Reiko's paranoid imagination. The reality is far more direct, as Yuki is met by Reiko herself, standing casually in his bedroom. She lets out a playful ihe, leaving the boy completely stunned and blushing at her sudden intrusion. The mysterious hooded figure is revealed to be Reiko, and her stealthy entrance is immediately met with a swift chop to the head from a startled Yuki. She lets out a sharp cry of pain from the sudden impact. The mysterious intruder turns out to be Reiko, who apparently came to swap notebooks. Yuki expresses his disapproval, telling her he's not happy about a girl wandering around by herself so late at night. Reiko cheekily points out that since Hez, the one who took the wrong notebook, Hez partly to blame. Exasperated, Yuki sighs, and says that if she had just told him, he would have brought it to her instead. The scene changes to Yuki's house, where he tells Reiko to wait for a moment while he quickly goes to grab something. Disregarding his request, Reiko walks right into his room, announcing her intrusion. Peeking from around the doorway, Yuki's mom looks on with a surprised expression. Reiko turns away from Yuki with a content smile, humming a little tune to herself. A blushing and sweating Yuki calls out for Rei-chan to hang on. The dark fantasy of the hooded figure gives way to reality, where Reiko now stands with Yuki inside his bedroom. She comments that it feels like forever since she's been in his room. The door slides shut behind them. Yuki stands flustered in his room, questioning why Reiko needed to come all the way inside when she only came over to get her notebook. Reiko gets close to him with a sly look on her face. She tells him that since Hez seen her room before, it's only fair that she gets to see his, adding that Hez the one who offered himself up anyway. Back in Reiko's room, it seems the study session has resumed. She tells Yuki to wait there for a moment while she finds something she's looking for. With a cheerful smile, she begins rummaging through her things. Yuki holds out the notebook he was looking for, telling Rei-chan has found it. She turns around with a bright, beaming smile. In a cute voice, she thanks him for finding it. Instead of rummaging through her things, Reiko casually climbs onto her bed. She lies on her stomach, propping herself up on her elbows. Looking back at Yuki over her shoulder, she gives him a sly, inviting smile. Instead of looking for anything, Reiko makes her way over to Yuki's bed and presses her hands into the mattress. With a look of pure delight, she exclaims that his bed is so soft and that she loves it. A flustered Yuki, sweating, profusely stammers out Reiko's name. She looks over at him from her position on the bed and asks what he wants, seemingly unaware of his distress. The mood in the room shifts dramatically when Yuki suddenly speaks with a serious expression. He issues a direct command to Reiko, telling her to get on her knees immediately. Completely caught off guard by the order, Reiko can only ask him to repeat what he just said. Yuki finally speaks up, telling Reiko that they are in middle school now. He awkwardly suggests that they have reached an age where they should probably be more mindful of personal boundaries. Reiko looks up, a bead of sweat on her cheek. She stammers for a moment before finally responding to Yuki asking yes. With a sigh, Yuki tells Reiko that since she's a girl, she can't just waltz into a guy's room and sit down on his bed like it's nothing. Covering his face with his hand, he adds that she should be so careless around guys because it's not good. As Reiko continues to rummage through her belongings, she suddenly freezes. A new thought seems to cross her mind, and she trails off with a single word. But Reiko suddenly leans forward on the bed, getting very close to Yuki. She tells him that this is something she wouldn't do with just anyone. She specifies that she only feels safe enough to do this because it's him. As Yuki watches Reiko's cheerful search comes to a halt, her expression shifts to a quiet, knowing look as she turns her attention back to him, and he stares back with wide, confused eyes at the sudden change in atmosphere. Reiko apologizes, saying she didn't mean to make Yuki worry. Standing with his arms crossed, Yuki replies that he's reflecting on it a little, though a small thought bubble clarifies that it's only a little. Yuki tells her to forget about the notebook swap for a second. He points out that she's been acting weird all day, especially by showing up at his house so suddenly, and asks if everything is okay. Reiko, sitting on his bed, explains that the study session was so much fun that she got a little lonely when everyone left. She turns back to Yuki with a sly, blushing smile. She tells him that since he's already there, she figured he could keep her company for a bit. Yuki stares ahead, his eyes wide and a blush covering his face as a bead of sweat rolls down his cheek. Beside him, Fuyuki squeezes his eyes shut, his own face flushed in embarrassment. Reiko playfully brushes off his lecture, striking a cute pose and calling herself a delicate maiden. Yuki sighs, muttering that she is surprisingly needy for someone who usually acts so confident. Deciding it's time to wrap this up before things get weirder, Yuki claps his hands and tells her it's time to go home. He offers to walk her back, but as Reiko moves to get off the bed, she loses her footing. Gravity takes over instantly. Yuki shouts in alarm, reaching out desperately to catch her as she tumbles backward toward the mattress. The world spins for Reiko. She lands on the soft bedding with a bounce, staring up at the ceiling in a daze. Yuki looms over her, his face pale with panic. He frantically asks Rei-chan, checking to see if she hit her head or got hurt in the fall. Reiko stares back at him, her eyes wide and unfocused. She blinks slowly, her face flushing a deep red as she tries to process their positions. She opens her mouth to speak, but only breathless, fragmented sounds come out. She stammers his name, her gaze darting nervously around his face. Her eyes drift downward, and her stammering turns into a terrified whisper. She manages to choke out the word "your" as she looks at her own chest. The situation goes from awkward to critical. In his desperate attempt to break her fall, Yuki's hand has landed squarely and firmly on her breast. Time stops completely. Reiko freezes a small "no," escaping her lips while Yuki stares blankly, his brain lagging a few seconds behind his sense of touch. The realization hits Yuki like a lightning bolt. His eyes nearly pop out of his head, and he starts to stammer a panicked apology, instinctively trying to yank his hand back, but Reiko stops him. To his shock, she grabs his hand and presses it tighter against her chest. She whispers a confusing, vulnerable plea for him not to move, murmuring that she hasn't taken a shower yet. She turns her face away, unable to meet his eyes, trembling with embarrassment. Yuki is left frozen, his mind reeling from the mixed signals of her words and her grip on his hand. Sweat pours down Yuki's face as he stares at her, his heart pounding in his chest. He tries to decipher what she means, completely overwhelmed by the sudden, intense intimacy. intimacy. The heavy atmosphere is shattered instantly by a loud, aggressive vibration. A phone buzzes violently in Reiko's pocket, startling both of them out of the trance and back to reality. The intense moment is broken by the persistent buzzing in Reiko's pocket. Yuki's face still burning awkwardly gestures for her to go ahead and answer it. Reiko, looking equally flustered, stammers that she should probably get that, the spell between them shattering instantly. Reiko answers the phone, her eyes wide as she snaps back to reality. It's her mother. She quickly confirms she's still at Yukun's place while Yuki, his brain clearly scrambled, mumbles something incoherent about buying milk in the background. The call ends and the charged atmosphere dissipates into a heavy, awkward silence. Reiko adjusts her clothes, avoiding eye contact, and quietly announces that she should head home now. Yuki, kneeling on the bed, just nods in agreement. Reiko walks to the door, but pauses before leaving. She turns back with a soft, somewhat melancholy expression, looking at Yuki, who stands frozen in the middle of the room, completely unsure of how to close out this interaction. Just as the silence threatens to stretch too long, Yuki calls out her name. Reiko stops and turns fully back toward him, her expression shifting to one of waiting anticipation. She looks up at him through her lashes, puffing her cheeks slightly, in a display of calculated vulnerability. She asks quietly if he isn't going to walk her home. Yuki blinks, surprised by the request. He asks if that's really okay, looking a bit confused by her sudden shift from the bold seductress on the bed back to his dependent childhood friend. Reiko steps up the pressure, staring intently at him with big, watering eyes. She asks if he would really send a girl home alone at this hour, effectively checkmating his conscience. Yuki immediately caves, blushing, as he agrees to escort her. Reiko gives a satisfied hum of affirmation, and the two of them head out into the night together. As they walk side by side, Reiko's innocent facade drops completely. A demonic, triumphant grin stretches across her face as she thinks that everything is going exactly according to plan, while Yuki walks beside her, blushing and completely oblivious to her true nature. A flashback reveals the catalyst for tonight's aggressive maneuvers. A few days earlier, Reiko had been spying from around a corner as a classmate confessed her love to Yuki. Yuki, who has recently experienced a significant glow-up and become popular with the girls, politely rejected the confession. He apologized, stating he already has someone he likes, while Reiko watched intently from the shadows. Reiko explains that despite her best efforts to mark her territory by flirting with him whenever she gets the chance, girls keep approaching him. She visualizes a horde of faceless rivals trying to swarm her Yukun, causing her significant stress. Reiko, revealed to be actively stalking him to monitor these threats, bites her lip in frustration. She notes that while Yuki has been turning everyone down so far, the situation is becoming far too risky to just leave alone. She admits to herself that this vulnerability opened up because she had been neglecting Yuki to focus on her schemes with Yuri. To correct this tactical error, she decided it was time to take drastic action and drive a nice deep wedge into him to secure her position. Here is the refined script, reconstructing the redacted narrative bridge based on the provided story bible and plot context. Back in the present, Reiko glances sideways at Yuki as they walk. He's still visibly flustered, stealing awkward looks at her. She notes with satisfaction that the wedge she drove in earlier, the bedroom seduction, was super effective. She realizes she has him on the ropes. If she pushed just a little harder right now, she could easily get a confession out of him. It would be a guaranteed win. But Reiko mentally slams the brakes. No, that's amateur thinking. That's what a normal girl in a rom-com would do, not the director of a masterpiece tragedy. She pulls up her mental roadmap. Her ultimate goal isn't a happily ever after with Yuki. It's to star in the perfect NTR scenario where she gets stolen away from him. She visualizes the timeline. If they start dating officially now in the first year of middle school, the relationship will be old news by the time they hit high school. The honeymoon phase would burn out, they'd settle into a comfortable, boring routine, and if she gets stolen, then it wouldn't hurt enough, it would just be a messy breakup. To achieve divine despair, the betrayal needs to happen at the absolute peak of their romance. The moment when Yuki is happiest, when he believes their love is invincible. That peak needs to coincide with high school, the golden age of drama. That is the stage where the tragedy must unfold. So for the next 3 years of middle school, her strategy isn't girlfriend. It's indispensable partner. She needs to be the air he breathes. She needs to make sure he relies on her for everything, keeping him hopelessly hooked without ever giving him the security of an official label. It's a cruel, calculated balancing act. She has to keep the sexual tension simmering just below the boiling point, edging his emotions for years. Reiko sighs internally, realizing the sheer amount of discipline this is going to take. Being a manipulative mastermind is exhausting work. Yuki breaks the silence, pointing out that they've arrived at her house. He looks relieved to be out of the tension, but there's a hint of disappointment that the walk is over. Reiko instantly drops the internal monologue. The cold strategist vanishes, replaced by the sweet, slightly vulnerable childhood friend he adores.